It has been an interesting last 24 hours in the business world. God, has it what? I think since I last talked to Craig, the 149 fast-track approval projects have been released, and I don't know if I saw one, Craig, Precinct Properties. Actually, I might as well bring them in now. Precinct Properties, mate. It was there. What was that for? Welcome, Craig. And you're looking spiffing.
Yeah.
That is a very nice turtleneck you've got there, mate. And that moustache has got no less luxuriant, I have to say.
Thank you. Yes, born of fecundity, perhaps. Who knows? But yes, thank you for that compliment. So that reference in the 149 projects to precinct is for the structure that's going to be built over the downtown car park, and the consent required enables a podium and 2 towers to be built above that podium in the area next to Commercial Bay at the bottom of Queen Street. So I've left Precinct Properties Board in November last year, and that was one of the projects we were working on. So pretty pleased to see they have got through that consent gate with ministerial fast track. Still has to go through the next stage, of course, which is experts and stuff like that, but at least it's on the list.
Yeah, and on that, there is the suggestion from a fevered media, Radio New Zealand adding to that fever this morning, I'll come to that in a second, but also from the opposition, Green Party environmentalists, that this is some sort of national destruction that has been planned of New Zealand. What's your take on that?
Well, there's broad categories of housing down your way, Homestead Bay. There's areas up around the back of Auckland, for example, for housing. I don't think anyone's going to argue around housing being provided for people that need them. Energy is another feature. Wind energy, I think, around the Balclutha area, Michael, your area as well.
Yeah.
As well as repowering of other sites in the wind area, plus solar, plus potentially a hydro, I think, on the west coast from memory. So, do people want to have more energy production? I think so. Don't think the demand for energy is diminishing. It's going to keep rising. So the issue really is, though, that the sort of sifting process, isn't it? How do these projects get through, and which ones didn't get through? And do they go down the old fast track route? Certainly not the slow track route. So just because you're not on a list, that doesn't mean to say that you still can't take advantage of fast track. So we'll just see how these things go through the expert process and what comes out the other end. But
just take me through, mate, though. Could you just take me through why fast track is necessary?
Well, it's born of frustrations, I think, with the RMA, which is a rather complicated beast, where the consent processes take, 7 years plus to get a development up and running. For example, wind farm consents, because of the consultative nature of the RMA requirements. These fast-track reforms and the reform of the RMA still to come are designed to try and focus on economic development more so than the process which had a counterweight with environmental concerns, and also the ability for neighbours who weren't necessarily neighbours to object to development, and it just slows everything down, and the costs of all that consultative process are enormous, and some people just don't even start because it's just too difficult.
Okay. How did it get that bad? Was it always that bad? I don't remember it being this bad in the past. Has it become more laboured over the last few decades, Craig?
Well, I think so. Yeah, it's like a calcification around a bone, for example. It just keeps calcifying. It gets more and more difficult and costly, and there are so many components around the consulting experts you need to bring in, whether it's engineers or town planners or resource consultants. It then becomes prohibitive. You just can't make the economics work, so you give up.
Okay.
I don't think we want that.
There is no. Well, we don't want it, but there is a suggestion from just about everybody else on the left-hand side that this is all appalling. Listen, and on that, Radio New Zealand this morning have published a story, and it's part of what they call an in-depth investigation, which is they've gone through all the 149 projects that have been approved, and they've found that 12 of them, of the 149, have companies or shareholders associated with giving more than $500,000 in political donations to the National ACT and New Zealand First Party and their candidates. The suggestion being, as I said earlier to 12 o'clock, that there is the hint or whiff of corruption or bribery in some of these particular projects. What's your response to that?
Well, I haven't seen the article, so I haven't got the primary information.
I've pretty much given it to you, mate. I mean, they've then just gone through the specific projects.
Okay. So assuming that's correct, it is a concern because it sort of goes to the question, how do these projects get through at the expense of others? Because we don't know what other projects did not get through that process. And it's something that we should be concerned about as taxpayers, and certainly the Auditor General would be interested to know around how these processes work. Are they open, contestable tenders or projects? Are our taxpayers' money, well served by funding these sorts of things? So, that is the problem with a ministerial process, a political process essentially. The RMA process itself tried to mitigate some of that by going through some processes that didn't mean you had a ministerial approval, although at some points you did, but you had to go through an EPA, a panel, to get through to the final consent process. So, on one side you get, faster consent processes happening, but you have ministerial intervention, which is always going to have the question mark around how do they prioritise these things? What were the drivers of choosing these projects over others?
Yeah, I know, but there's a part of me that I'd prefer that politicians that I elect and who are accountable to me have an involvement over judges, commissioners, a whole series of people I would never elect, aren't accountable or responsible to me, and who, with a whole series of lobby groups like Fish and Game, Forest and Bird, regional councils, get involved in this long, protracted process. I mean, isn't politics there to service the community, Craig? Don't we want politicians to get involved rather than leave it to bureaucrats?
Well, the original intent of these fast tracks under the proposed process was solely or pretty much solely a ministerial intervention, but the public pushed back pretty hard against that. And now it's a process which starts with the minister and then goes to more of a traditional panel situation. So there will be other so-called experts involved in the next stage. So there's potentially a balance of views being brought to the projects that wasn't there in the original conception of the ministerial sponsored fast track scheme, because the public get concerned about that. So will that help mitigate some of those concerns? I don't know yet.
Well, listen, and when you talk about public, I mean, people who get into the media make a concern. I'm not sure that the public of this country are particularly concerned about it. They just want things to happen. Listen, on that too, there is still a process to go through. So you were involved originally with that precinct one. I understand that you've left that job now, but what's the difference? You talked about 7 years in your introductory comments there about how long these projects can last. Under the process that's set out under the Fast Track Approvals Bill, and remember it's still not legislation yet, what are the projects, how long are they expected to move from go to woe by comparison?
Yeah, well, I can't speculate on the precinct example because that's still in the future, but my own experience with New Zealand wind farms is one where we got consent to repower an existing wind farm in 21 months. My colleagues in the industry have told me that it's taken them 7 years to get consent. So there's the comparison difference. Now, that's a lot of time and money, consultants and opportunity cost, where things don't get built. And to me, why would a 21-month process ever need to take 7 years? Arguably, it shouldn't be 21 months. If it's a straightforward application with benefits clear and any costs mitigated, why can't it get through in 12 months or less?
That's the question. Yeah. I mean,
as you think you're speaking about Fukushima, which was March 11, 2011 from memory, and you said they rebuilt the town in 3 months or whatever it is. How do they do that? Extraordinary. How do we have a culture here that encourages development because it produces outcomes that are good for our communities? Just having the right to be able to say no because you live 600 miles away from a site, I'm not sure that's appropriate.